All right, good to see everyone this morning. Our numbers are down this morning, but it's okay. Good to see you this morning. Turn to Joshua chapter 16. Once again, there are some handouts on the table right there, the door coming into the auditorium. If you'd like to grab some. There are several chapters there. They're pretty short, but you can take notes on them. Just the overview, summary of the chapters that we will be covering. So we left off last Sunday morning, Joshua 15. Joshua 15. I'll give it about a minute. More people coming in. So last Sunday morning we went through Joshua 15. So there's two handouts on the table, last week's and this week's. So if you did not get one last week, there's some extras. But if you did, you don't need both. Just the one that starts with 16. So this morning, we're going to work our way through 16, 17, and 18 because these current chapters are a little bit monotonous, a lot of detail just as far as land division and the territory that it describes was given to the tribes. So a lot of sections are just dedicated to a description of territory, and we just have not been reading that. But we have been focusing on the division and the order in which the tribes have received land. So, starting in chapter 16, pretty short chapter, and there's a if you look at your outline, there is a typo, so there's not 60 on the outline, second page of chapter 6. Joshua 16, second page, there's an outline that says there's 63 verses. Well, there's 63 verses in chapter 15. Pretty long chapter, chapter 15. Chapter 16, shorter chapter. It's dedicated to the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, who are the sons of Joseph. So remember that, don't forget that. These tribes are the sons of Joseph. If you've ever wondered why there's not a tribe for Joseph, there is technically, but represented through his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so there may be some sections of text that we don't read through because it's just territories and borders. But in the middle, kind of like tucked away, in the chapters, there's some interesting details, some events or some information that the writer gives to us that we do need to focus on as we go through these three chapters. So, as we think about Joshua 16, we're still in the middle of this land division. So, Joshua 16, again, this conquering. This conquest of the land lasted from 5 to 7 years. I would venture to say more 7 years than 5, but 5 to 7 years we're looking at. We have the characters in the chapter 16. You have Joshua, again, the leader of Israel at this time. He followed Moses. And then you have the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. If we go back to chapter 14 and verse 6, we see that they are camped in Gilgal on the western side of the Jordan, and they are giving the land to the tribes by lot, and we'll talk more about that as we go through what this process of by lot means, or given to them by drawing lots. All right, Joshua 16, let's go to the text. Verse 1, the lot fell to the children of Joseph from the Jordan by Jericho to the waters of Jericho on the east, to the wilderness that goes up to the wilderness that goes up from Jericho through the mountains to Bethel, then went out from Bethel to Luz, passed along the border of, so we have, again, just territory being described here. Then verse 4, so the children of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, took their inheritance. And so what happens next is just a description for Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, if you look at your maps, either the one on the screen or you have a map in your handout, we see that Ephraim will receive their land on the western side of the Jordan there. You see Ephraim, and then Manasseh will, on the western side, receive some land north of Ephraim. So there on the western side of the Jordan, you have Ephraim and half the tribe of Manasseh. The other half is on the east side of the Jordan, if you remember that in our studies. And so Manasseh is the only tribe that was divided up and received two lots of land on the east and the western side. And so that's what is chapter 16 following. The border of the children of Ephraim according to their families was thus. The border of their inheritance on the east side, and going down the border, verse 6, went out toward the sea on the north side. So again, just have a lot of description here. But verse 10 is quite relevant and something to read and remember, which will be Ephraim's downfall. So they were commanded to drive all of the Canaanites out, not to leave any of them, to completely eradicate these pagan people who worshiped idols. And you see that often with Israel. It seems that they allow the practices of other people to creep in. They dwell among these pagans. They begin to worship the false gods that these pagans begin to worship. But verse 10, and they did not drive out the Canaanites who dwelt in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwell among the Ephraimites to this day and have become forced laborers. So the land that Ephraim receives, verse 10 says, but they did not drive out all of the Canaanites. And so there are still Canaanites that live in the land that Ephraim inherits. They did not drive all of the Canaanites out. Now, we might say, well, the good thing is that they made them servants, or my text says forced laborers, and so they were slaves or servants to the children of Israel. But still, it's going to be their downfall. They're going to live among the Israelites as pagan, idolatrous people, and eventually they're going to adapt and accept the ways of these Canaanites. And we'll notice a reference here from Hosea in just a moment. But already we see that they have violated the command of God. God said to drive out all of the Canaanites. Do not allow them to live among you. Do not allow them to live among you. Well, they allowed them to live there. They make them forced laborers, servants. And so now Ephraim and we'll see maybe some other tribes do as well. But at least Ephraim is living with Canaanites in their land. Now, if we turn over to Hosea chapter 4, we see the downfall of the descendants of Hosea, or of Ephraim. Hosea chapter 4, verse 17, Ephraim is joined to idols. Ephraim is joined to idols. Let him alone. Their drink is rebellion. They commit harlotry continually. Her rulers dearly love dishonor. So it seems as though the descendants of Ephraim at some point accepted and began to worship the idols of the Canaanites that were allowed to remain in the land when God clearly warned them to drive out all the people, but they did not, and that will be their eventual downfall. But that's chapter 16, very short chapter, 10 verses, Ephraim. And then we have, beginning in verse 17, the second half of the tribe of Manasseh on the west side of the Jordan, and their land division in chapter 17, and the land that falls to them by lot. And so let's read verse 1, and then I want to pause for just a moment and talk a little bit more about this idea of dividing the land by lot. Did a little bit more study and research about that this week. Still some information that I'm not quite sure about, but some interesting thoughts. But chapter 17, verse 1, there is also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. And so this is the second half here of the tribe of Manasseh. But let's think about this idea of lot, of casting lot. There's a verse in our text, and now that I'm talking about it, I can't remember, but it specifically says something about Joshua casting lots for the land. Maybe it's in 18. If I can find it quickly. If not, perhaps we'll come to it. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. So Joshua chapter 18, if we were to skip up to there and drop down to verse 7, 6. So we'll get there eventually this morning, but in Joshua 18, there are 7 tribes who still have not received their land allotment, or their land division hasn't been assigned to them. And so in 18 verse 6, there's this conversation with Joshua about the 7 tribes that still have not received land. Verse 6, you shall therefore survey the land. So Joshua tells them to get 3 men to go survey the land. Verse 6, you shall therefore survey the land in 7 parts, and bring the survey here to me, that I may cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. And so it seems, at least to me in my studies, that is how they divided the land among these tribes. It was done by casting lots. And one preacher that I listened to this week, his suggestion, and it was a lot more detailed than what I'm going to give. He gave names and descriptions, and he said that there was, I don't even know, I'm not even going to try to describe it the way he did, but basically there was a container, like a bag, that contained 2 different rocks, and the rocks were 2 different colors. And he said that one color represented a particular answer from the Lord, like yes, and the other color represented no. And so they would divide this land, and let's just say that they're with the tribe of Manasseh. Does Manasseh get this section of land? And then they would cast lots, or they would draw a stone. Does Manasseh get this section of land? Yes or no? But they did so in accordance to God. So God used this as a way of dividing the land with the Israelites. So I don't know if that's how they did it. That's the way he suggested, that's how they cast lots. Maybe it looked differently for different groups of people. We see casting lots throughout the Bible. In the Old Testament, we see it in the New Testament, the way that they would cast lots. We don't do that today, and that's a different discussion, but they did it back then. In fact, the first time, well, before I get there, so let's go to Proverbs 16. Proverbs 16:33. Proverbs 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. And again, this is where my knowledge kind of is limited. I don't know how to describe or explain or go into more detail, but it seems to me, we may read something like this and it's a little foreign to us. It may even sound like gambling because that's kind of the wordage that we use today. But very different back then. It seems as though that there was a decision to make, and often they would cast lots, but it was done in a way of the decision coming from God in the casting of lots, as Proverbs says here, but its every decision is from the Lord. So, as we talk a little bit more about casting lots, the very first time it's ever mentioned in your Bible is in Leviticus chapter 16. Leviticus chapter 16. And we see it with Aaron. And Aaron would use this system of casting lots when there were two goats or sheep, goats that were represented, and he would cast lots to determine which one would be the scapegoat and which one would be sacrificed. And so he would cast lots for these two goats to determine which one was used for which. And so this is the first time that we see the idea of casting lots. Leviticus chapter 16, beginning in verse 6, is the mentioning of casting lots. Well, let's see, Leviticus 16:8. But beginning in verse 6, Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall take the two goats and present them before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the two goats, one for the Lord, one goat designated to the Lord, and the other lot for the scapegoat. So basically, two goats. Which one's going to be sacrificed and dedicated to the Lord, and which one the scapegoat? Verse 9, and Aaron shall bring the goat on which the Lord's lot fell. And so when the lot or the casting of lots determined the goat, he would bring the Lord's, the one designated to the Lord, the lot fell on that goat, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be a scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement upon it and to let it go as a scapegoat into the wilderness. And so, first time we in Scripture, at least, see this casting lots to determine something. The very last time that we see it is in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 1. After Judas betrayed the Lord, and he went out and he hanged himself. There we see in Acts 1, verse 26, the disciples come together and they decide among themselves that they need to replace Judas. And so the way that they do that is by casting lots. And so Acts 1, verse 23, getting a little bit of the context, and they proposed to Joseph, called Barsabbas, who was surnamed Justus, and Matthias. So it seems two men are presented here. And they prayed and said, "You, O Lord, who know the hearts of all, show which of these two you have chosen to take part in this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place." And they cast their lots. Which of these two will fill the place of Judas? And the lot fell on Matthias, and he was numbered with the 11 apostles. Really, the only time, not even really, the only time you read about Matthias, who filled the spot for Judas. But to pick who it would be, they cast lots. And so the first time is in Leviticus that we see casting lots. The last time we see it happening is in Acts chapter 1. But then we go back to our text, Joshua. Seems very clear, just reading the casting of lots here with Joshua. That's how they selected the land with the 12 tribes, and who got the land and where, and how it fell to the 12 tribes. So just a little bit more information there with this casting of lots. Going back to chapter 17, verse 1, there was also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. Now, again, we're not going to read a lot of the description of family and borders and land. But there is something interesting here. There is something interesting. If you lived in this day and you had a son, right, he received the inheritance. Well, what if you don't have a son? Well, who does it go to? Well, we don't have time for that kind of conversation, but here's something that arises as there's a man who does not have any sons but daughters. And they will be counted in the inheritance of the land here. Beginning in verse 3, and again, I'm going to struggle with these names, but we're going to go through it. But Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh. So again, this is the tribe of Manasseh. So we've worked our way from one man, but Zelophehad, the son, we worked our way to Manasseh. It says, had no sons, but only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters. Malay, Noah, interestingly, seems to be a woman's name too. Hagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they came near before Eleazar the priest. Right? So here's this man with no sons, just daughters. And they came before Eleazar the priest. And so if we go to the handout I gave you, we see the characters in chapter 17. We have Joshua, the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh. And we also have Eleazar, the high priest of Israel, which means he's from what tribe? Levites, yeah. He's from the tribe of Levi. All right. Verse 4, and they came before Eleazar the priest, before Joshua the son of Nun, and before the rulers, saying, the Lord commanded Joshua, or Moses, to give us an inheritance among our brothers. Therefore, according to the commandment of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brothers. 10 shares fell to Manasseh, besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, which were on the other side of the Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance among his sons, and the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead. And so, I don't know what else to say about that. Besides, here are some daughters that receive part of the inheritance that would have gone to sons, but he had no sons, so it went to the daughters. And so, interesting there. Verse 7, and the territory of Manasseh was from Asher, and so beginning in verse 7, we have a description of the land of Manasseh that he will inherit. And again, if you look at your map, you see the western side, the land that Manasseh receives, a description of it. Now, beginning in verse 14, there seems to be some in the tribe of Manasseh that are not content with their land. And so let's read 14 to the end of the chapter. Joshua 17:14. Then the children of Joshua spoke to Joseph, spoke to Joshua. So this would be Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, why have you given us only one lot and one share to inherit, since we are a great people, insomuch as the Lord has blessed us until now? And so they don't seem satisfied with what they received. It seems like they desire something bigger and better. Well, maybe not better, but bigger. Seems like they want more. Well, nothing wrong with that. And Joshua doesn't even say that they can't, but here's what he says, verse 15. So Joshua answered them, if you are a great people, then go up to the forest country and clear a place for yourselves there in the land of the Perizzites and the giants, since the mountains of Ephraim are too confined for you. And so Joshua says to Ephraim, the sons of Joseph here, you are a great people, and if you want more land, his advice is to go up to the wooded country, the forest country, clear out the woods, clear out the land, and inherit that as well. Verse 16, but the children of Joseph said, the mountain country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron, both those who are of Beth Shean and its towns, and those who are of the valley of Jezreel. And Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are a great people, and you have great power. You shall not have only one lot, but the mountain country shall be yours, although it is wooded. You will cut it down, and its farthest extent shall be yours. You shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots and are strong. And so, to end chapter 17 here, both of the tribes, it seems, the sons of Joseph, they have a complaint, and they come to Joshua. And they say that the land that we received initially, this one lot, it says, is not large enough for us. We're a great people. And Joshua says to them to go and clear out the woods. Now, maybe they did not want to do that. And it also seems that there are still Canaanites in the country. There's giants and there's Canaanites still in the country with iron chariots, and they're strong people, but they are to drive